Well, this is very much an English summer's day today. We've got quite a bit of blue sky, but every now and then the sunshine will disappear because patchy clouds going to roll in and out. I think the sunshine could turn a bit weak and hazy from time to time, and there's a small chance as you go through the afternoon that there will be some showers breaking out, and some of those could be heavy. But your top temperature is 25 Celsius.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
That's the congestion charge done for then, isn't it? Referendum we're going to have. Yeah. You can have a bit of a referendum if you fancy it. Yeah. No, there's a congestion charge website on the BBC Manchester, or a congestion charge bit on the BBC Manchester website. If you want to go and have a shufty at that, feel free. You've got plans, case studies, maps to download, all sorts of gubbins. And there's a sort of question asked: how would you vote in a referendum on Manchester's great transport future? Well, how would you vote? You're going to get a referendum. We've just found out. You just heard it announced in the news by Rachel. So we're going to get a referendum. We're going to be able to say yay or nay. The process they've chosen to use is that each of the local authorities will hold a referendum individually. So that'll be 10 referenda, one for each local authority. And then it'll be a first past the post, a yay or nay system. There's only not much of a race, really, is it? Yay or nay. But the winner, it'll be a 1% win. So if you one vote could swing it, so I suspect we'll all be going out and voting to make sure. But if your area decide yay and all the other 9 decide nay, you're stuffed. It will require 7 authorities to say yes for the plans to continue. Well, I think it's dead in the water. But that's a shame, because, frankly, it would have been interesting to see how it panned out. But there you go. So you're going to get a referendum. At last, a kind of democracy has come to bear. But are you happy with that? Would you be happy if you voted against it and yet others voted for and 7 local authorities managed to get a yes vote? Would you then shut up about it and say, well, we had a fair vote and frankly it didn't go our way, so that's the end of it? What would you say to people today? What reasons would you give for casting your vote? That's the important thing. It's simple. Yes, you can come on and just say, I'd vote yes, I'd vote no, and that gives us some guide. But why would you vote yes or no? It was interesting. You heard that little vox that we played for a little. I'm sorry, I'm using jargon. You heard a couple of people who we stopped in the street of Manchester and just asked them, just sent somebody out with a tape recorder dead quick, would you vote yay or nay? And everybody seemed to think it was a good idea to deal with congestion. An excellent idea, and something has to be done. The problem is, what? I was at a do on Wednesday evening. I'd just got back from holiday. I was actually opening the Lee Arts Show. It's where all a group of artists in Lee, they have a show every year. They're amateurs is what you might call them. But I don't want to use that in a disparaging way. But they all get together and they display their works. They're up for sale. If you go to the art gallery in Lee, the library, if you go there in Lee any time in the next week or so, these pictures will be on display and you can buy them. And each year they ask me, I'm quite pleased to do it, each year they ask me to open it. And I got talking to a counsellor there, just who happened to be there, presumably to buy a picture. But we got talking about it, and she asked me a very, very good question. A very good question. And that was, if you don't have... I mean, I was griping about the Lee busway. I'm not a fan of the Lee busway. I'm not, and that's it. I've made it clear to Roger Jones, and I have had a number of not cross words, but interesting words about it. I'm dead set against that particular bit of it, because I think it'll just steal a lane of the East Lancs Road for no real benefit, honestly. But there you are. That's because they haven't got a lot of options. They can't put a tram in there. They can't put a railway line in there after Beeching ripped it up. So they've not really got much of an option. And she asked me a very good question, and frankly, I didn't have an answer. And that was, well, if not the Lee busway, what instead? What do you do instead? How do you make it so that you can get to Manchester from Lee, from Atherton, from all points west in a reasonable length of time? And the answer is you can't. You can't. I don't know how we do it. So, if you're one of the people who says, no, we don't want the congestion charge, it stinks, what happens instead? You see, people think of the congestion charge as a way of raising money to pay for half, more or less half, of the developments in public transport and the like that the local authorities want to provide. But it's not just that. The congestion charge is a way of getting people, yes, getting the money to pay for half of the developments, yes. But it's also a way of making people change their mind about the way they come to Manchester and leave Manchester. It's, if you like, taxing people off the road. Now, if you want to diminish congestion in the Greater Manchester conurbation, how would you do it without punitive measures, without it costing somebody something? I promise you, if they said to me, it's going to cost you £50 a day to come to Manchester, I would very, very seriously consider coming on the bus. Our house sitter, when we go on holiday, we have a house sitter. And our house sitter, Anna, she stayed at our house whilst we were away, and she lives in Manchester generally, and she had to come into, she doesn't drive, she had to come into Manchester from Lee to an appointment whilst we were, it took her 2.5 hours on the bus. 2.5 hours. Well, nobody's going to make that choice, are they? Unless you make it expensive for them. Now, the same applies, perhaps it doesn't take 2.5 hours, but the same applies all the way around the place, doesn't it? If you live in Oldham, how would you come to Manchester? How would you do it? Well, by the car. Why not? And the only way we're going to stop you doing it by car, presuming we want to, is by making it so that it costs you more than you want it to cost. So that's the answer. That's the answer. If you want to get people off the roads, you have to make it so that they choose something else. Now, yes, you can provide a very convenient mode of transport in its stead, but you have to also surely push them out of the car. You tell me, if we're not going to have the congestion charge, how do we diminish congestion in Greater Manchester? If you've got an answer to that, you're a better man than I am. Bung it in. 0161228 2255. Going to talk to Phil in Failsworth very shortly.
Andy Crane, live at the Lowry.
An MP has been given the boot by his cheeky girl. Let bit old pick.
The main reason, what the catalyst was, he missed a speech by Gabrielle at the Embassy Club. That's London Embassy Club, not Bernard
Not Bernard's old place. No.
Two Dominions, welcome to a bar. And her understanding of politics, she went, whatever.
Music, politics and comedy.
Maintaining a relationship when you work in Manchester and London must be a tough thing to hold down.
Unfortunately, my kids managed to grow up despite me being an MP, and they still speak to me on occasions. I think in Moss Side they thought I was part of a gang, so it's
Your Sunday lunchtime mix, live at the Lowry, with Andy Crane. Sunday from noon.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Not to be missed. Some great conversation. Phil in Failsworth. Hiya, Phil.
Hi, Alan. How are you doing?
Not bad, mate. What have you got for us?
Congestion charge.
Yeah.
Read the books.
Okay, I've not read mine yet, but go on.
Well, read the book. And one point I noticed is we estimate that fewer than 20% of peak time drivers in Greater Manchester will pay a charge. It's on everything I've read so far.
Yeah.
So I went to the roadshow and asked 20% of what? And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, 20% is of a number. 20 in every 100. That's a percentage, yeah?
Yeah.
Don't know. Can't tell you. All right? But if you phone this number, the back of the book, more detailed information. Okay. Phone the number. Sorry, can't tell you. Get somebody to ring you back. Which they did the day after. Asked the question. Sorry, don't have a figure for that. I'm waiting now for a written reply. And I'm getting 3 booklets, more detailed. They're not giving everybody, only those that require them. The one thing I did find out, they reckon it's going to bring in 170 million, this congestion charge per year, running cost of 31 million. Now, with my simple mathematics, I've worked out there's 253 days that we will have to pay. Well, we won't have to pay, I don't think, now, because they're going to a vote, which brings in, this means to me, going off that, there's 200, the average is £3 per person, they're saying, which is 224,000 people to pay. Okay? But there's 896,000 won't be paying. Now, surely, that's not easing congestion, really, is it? And it's also doing nothing for the environment.
Well, the mathematics.
Figures here.
Well, you are playing with figures, but in truth, you don't need to do much arithmetic to work out the 20%, because you can look at the people who come into Manchester now, and it is one of the most surveyed, one of the most traffic surveyed area, because they didn't just decide on the congestion charge out the blue. They looked at the people who come in, and they know who comes into Manchester en masse. And they can look at those people and say, well, hang on a minute, we won't be charging... I'm not saying this is the case, because I don't know the specific rules, but you can say, we're not going to charge people with disabilities. We're not going to charge, I don't know, taxi drivers. We won't be charging buses. And you can look at what section of society, what percentage that section of society constitutes. And then you can say, well, 20% of society fall into the category of, or 20% of motorists fall into the categories, the collective categories of those who will not be charged. So that's how you get to the figure.
No, you don't have to... 20% actually being charged. Well,
okay. Well, it doesn't matter what the percentages are. You look and you say... 20% will pay, if that's the way they've phrased it. You have the advantage of me, I've not read the booklet. But it doesn't matter, because you don't need to know what the total figure is. You only need to know what percentage of society use the roads at the moment, so you can get a number from that. And then you know from those figures what percentage of those who use it now would be required to pay if they continued to use it. So that's a simple...
That's the figure they can't give, though. I mean,
well, they have given the figure. They've given the figure as 20%. What they haven't given is 20% of what figure?
Exactly.
Well, it isn't a 20% of this many million or that many million. It's 20% of the, if you like, driving population. You don't need to know the size of the population in order to know what figure. If I stand at the side of the road... and I watch the vehicles go by, yes, I will work out how many there are. So I'll say, right, there are 200 people. So 200 vehicles have just driven past me. One was a taxi, one was an ambulance, one had a disability sticker on display. So I know that there's 1.5%, who would not be charged. Now, I don't have to know, I don't have to deliver a figure of 200. I know that this many percent of society will not be charged. I don't have to know the population, and I don't have to...
They must know how many cars are coming into... within reason, per day.
Yes, they do.
Say there's congestion.
Yes, they do, but they won't... Once they've got to the figure... It's a bit like your 11 plus, if you remember that. I don't know whether you're of an age. You're 11 plus...
I'm of an age like you.
Oh, well, you poor beggar, mate. But with the 11 plus, they used to say, give us the answer, you don't have to show you're working out. Now, you are correct, and they would have to know what 100% represented in order to find 20%. But you wouldn't report that. You would just report the 20%. I'm not defending their figures. I'm defending the process.
What I'm getting at, I'm going off the figures. I've been playing about with maths.
Yeah.
Is, according to what they're saying, 170 million is what they say they will get in.
The funds, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That were the takings.
31 million of that is to run the thing.
Yes.
Okay. So they're going to make a profit, and they're going to pay the loan off.
Yeah, there's going to... On those figures, there's about 130-odd million quid to pay interest.
The average charge of £3 is another thing they're saying. What I'm getting at is there's nearly 900,000 cars in Greater Manchester not paying.
Yeah.
Now, and they're going on about cleaning the air up, etc., etc. That's not going to clean the air.
Well, yes, but if I leave my car at home, I won't be paying.
Yeah, but these cars are still be on the road.
Well, mine would still be on the road at other times.
I'm driving, I think.
Well, mine would be on the road. I wouldn't... The congestion charge, as it stands at the moment, if I was still working here, which is always a question mark...
on a daily basis.
Minute by minute, Phil.
I'll listen to you.
And if I was still working these hours, then I wouldn't pay the congestion charge, just because I come into Manchester after it would have shut down and I go out of Manchester before it would come back on, so I wouldn't pay it. Am I part of the 80%? I'm beggared if I know.
No, you're not, 'cause it says peak time drivers.
Well, listen, Phil, if I'm travelling, it is the peak time.
It says peak time.
I do take your point that the figures are imprecise, but frankly...
I think they're dangling an hook, you see, 20%. Oh, well, hang on, there's only 20 in every 100 going to pay this. I mean, I don't think, as you've just said yourself, I think it's dead in the water now.
Well, that's my suspicion.
I think something's got to be done.
What then?
But I honestly don't know.
That's the problem, isn't it? I had exactly the same response when the councillor, I think her name was Myra, when the councillor asked me on Wednesday night, well, all right, Beswick, you're against it, but you're against the Lee busway. I don't have a view of the congestion charge, but I'm against the Lee busway. What would you do instead? And the answer is, I'm begging if I know.
You see, it's one of them. I mean, there's a guy on radio the other morning, the driving instructor. We should be exempt.
Yeah, everybody wants to be exempt.
I run a little business and I do deliveries. I should be exempt.
Good on you, Phil. Well, we shall campaign for you. One last question. I've only got time for a one-word answer. Are you for or again?
Again.
Good on you, Phil. Thank you very much indeed. It's 21.5 minutes past 12 on BBC Radio Manchester. Latest news from Faye Rusco.
You will get the chance to vote on whether a congestion charge will be introduced across Greater Manchester. It's been decided within the last hour to go ahead with a referendum in the 10 local authorities. The Manchester MP Graham Stringer says Labour needs to ask whether Gordon Brown should resign as Prime Minister in the wake of the party's latest by-election defeat in Glasgow. And the energy firm EDF has announced more price rises. It's putting electricity charges up by 17% and gas by 22%. Manchester's weather warm with the chance of some showers, highs of 25 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Starting off on the motorways, and thankfully everything seems to have quietened down again on the M60 anti-clockwise. It was built up for some time between 13 Worsley and 12 Eccles because of an earlier accident, but thankfully everything, as I say, running back to normal now. And again, M62 traffic eastbound heading towards Leeds, all calmed down between 19 Hayward and 20 at Rochdale. We're not doing too badly either on the M6 southbound. For a time, north and southbound traffic was queuing up because of an earlier collision on the southbound. The vehicle was moved to the hard shoulder and has just been recovered now, so as I say, traffic does seem to be easing off in the area. Still fairly busy though, I notice, on Chester Road in Knutsford on the A556 as people continue to make the way to the flower show at Tatton Park, and it's heaviest between the M6 at junction 19 Knutsford and Mearside Road. Don't forget, if you can update me further though, why not get in touch on the travel line, and the number you need is 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Gordon Brown's been speaking this morning. He was addressing the Labour Party's Policy Forum in Warwick, and he said this. See if you can work out what it means. We will do whatever is necessary over the next few months to help hard-working families through these difficult times. We know that while the problem is global, it affects people directly in every local community, and that is why over the next few months you'll see in housing and in gas and electricity bills and in energy us doing more to help the hard-working families of this country. So Gordon Brown promises to help the hard-working families of this country. The unemployed, of course, he's going to flog them and make them graft. Mitch in Little Hulton, hi.
Afternoon, Squire.
Afternoon. I'm very well, thank you.
The congestion charge is going to happen whether we like it or not, irrespective of any referendum, and is going to happen sooner or later, and it'll be later if the referendum happens. I have been a bus driver now for about 23 years. I drive buses up in Rochdale. I've got to know people over the years, including some people down at GMPTE. Now, this is entirely unofficial, But there are a few people who work down there who I've known for many years, and I was chatting with a couple of them last week rather, and they say to me, well, and these people obviously know things more than I do because they work for the PT.
Yeah, we better say Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive is who we're talking about. Go on, carry on.
Correct. Yeah. And they tell me that from what they hear and from what they understand, all internally, entirely unofficial, that whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. Now, my own personal feeling is that I don't want it to happen. I'm like a lot of other people, and I also think that bus drivers should be exempt.
Bus drivers or the drivers of vehicles? Well, I mean, you're a bus driver when you're driving your bus. Do you mean permanently? So yes. I'm a bus driver, therefore I must never pay? Or only when you're driving your bus? I think bus companies should be exempt because they've got to go into Manchester. What I'm trying to get to, you said bus drivers. Right. Obviously, I suspect that buses won't have to pay. But bus drivers, I mean, you can be a bus driver on a Saturday afternoon when you're not working and you're coming in shopping. Do you mean then, or do you just mean the bus? Yes. So bus drivers, wherever they're going, shouldn't have to pay the congestion charge, whether they're in the bus or not? I think when they are on the way to and from work... Oh, right, going to and from, yeah. To and from work in their own personal vehicles, if they have to pass through Manchester, then they shouldn't have to pay. Neither should ambulance drivers, fire drivers, fire engine drivers, policemen, police and women, and the like. Why? Because you could go to work, most often you could go to work on public transport. Indeed, you could do it and not even pay for that. Unfortunately, I couldn't, and I doubt whether many bus drivers particularly could. From where I live, which is Little Hulton, I go up to Rochdale. It doesn't actually apply to me, but I used to work in Gorton. Yeah. So from Little Hulton to Gorton, I have to pass by city centre. Okay, but why should bus drivers who work at horrible hours sometimes, why should bus drivers and ambulance drivers on their way to work not have to pay when shopkeepers and office workers have to pay? Your job is important, but frankly, it's no more important than the receptionist at the emergency centre, or indeed an accountant who's going to make sure you get your wages. Okay, I'll rephrase it all. I think those involved in emergency services and public services. That's everybody who works at the council, everybody who works in the tax office. Is the BBC a public service? No, okay, I'll rephrase it again. There's only about 6 people left to pay, Mitch. Okay, I'll rephrase it again. Okay, have another go. Those involved in essential emergency services and those providing services like taxi drivers, hauliers, bus drivers, and the like. Those who have to... So are providing a very significant public service. I don't think we should have to pay because of the service that we provide. I'm fortunate right now because I don't have to touch the city centre, and quite frankly, I don't want to go into the city centre. I hate and despise it. And all right, we've got all that. I'm intrigued at your conversations with anonymous employees of Greater Manchester Passenger Transport Executive, because you seem to say that they will be bringing it in at some point in the future, and the referendum is not that relevant. The referendum is total. It is a total waste of time. I love referendums. If we had referendums on being in the European Union, it'd be great. I doubt whether that would have any effect, though. And but I'm intrigued. How could they possibly do it? The Passenger Transport Executive cannot implement the referendum, implement the congestion charge just because they want to. They will need the local authorities. It's a political decision, not an executive decision. And without the authority from the local authorities, from AGMA and its members, they won't be able to do it. So are you telling me that AGMA and its members are going to ignore the congestion charge? Well, they can't ignore it, but you've just hit on a very important point. It's politics. Well, of course it is. It's the whole. There will be wheeling and dealing and money. I'm not saying illegal money change. I know what you mean. Yeah, budgets moved.
There will be things happening politically that will make it somehow happen. And it may not be within the next 12 to 18 months, or even maybe within the next 2 or 3 years. But it's going to happen, whether we like it.
So I mean, I'm not wanting to put words in your mouth, so do feel free to spit these out. But you seem to be saying that if the referendum decides no, and I think you're predicting that it will, if the referendum decides no, the local authorities that are in favour will then start the machinations to find a way round that.
Maybe not the local authorities, but there will. I'm sure that someone will be persuading people, for instance, something to the example of, well, if you vote yes, then we'll give you X, Y, Z kind of thing.
Well, yes, but they've got to say that to the people, because it's the people that are going to have the referendum.
We, in the sort of general populace, will never know what happens behind closed doors. And
But we'll still cast the vote. I mean, if the vote is no, then it's very difficult to see how the politicians can then promise you something without having another referendum to overturn the original one. But we shall see. It's an interesting thought. Good on you, mate. Cheers, Mitch.
Thanks. Bye.
Drive safely. Have a good day. 01612 228 2255. Colin in Bolton says, in response to your comment pertaining to the congestion charge, why not construct a Greater Manchester Underground similar to that in London? Well, I can answer that like that. Because it would cost something like £200 billion, and it would knacker Manchester for about 2 decades. Apart from that, can see nothing against it. John in Wigan. Hiya, John.
Good afternoon, Alan.
Afternoon.
I'm of the opinion as any improvement on the road transport system in Manchester or Greater Manchester should be paid for to general taxation. Everybody benefits and everybody should pay. For too long now, British motorists are being treated like a cash cow. 80% of what you and I pay for on your road fund licence now doesn't pay for road improvements. But everybody benefits from the roads being good. So everybody should pay out your general taxation. I mean, if you have the situation where there was 100% uptake on this improved transport system, if it ever came about, a few lorry drivers that came into Manchester a day, would have to pay £1 million to fund it. Otherwise, it wouldn't fund itself. It's ridiculous. It's treating motorists as a cash cow. I'm firmly of the opinion it should be paid for to general taxation.
Well, OK, I understand that, and if it was to be funded out of general taxation only, in the foreseeable future, it wouldn't happen, because no government, and we're talking about government here, we're not talking about local authorities, they haven't got the power, they are toothless and a waste of time in matters like this. No government would be prepared to fund it, and no electorate would be prepared to instruct a government, for want of a better term, to double the taxes that we pay in order to fund it. Well, so it just would not happen.
With respect, you wouldn't have to double the taxes.
Well, you would if you wanted. You would if it. Well, let's come to France in a moment. But you would have to double it if you're going to introduce the kind of developments that are being talked about. £3 billion in Manchester. Liverpool wants one too, as does Sheffield, as does every city and every town in the country. So you couldn't say, well, that town's getting it and that town's not, as a national government.
But the French system is they pay less on a road fund licence than we do. They pay less on petrol.
They do indeed.
But pay more on tax. Now, everybody pays tax because the French principle is everybody benefits, so everybody pays. I mean, the French, as you probably aware, I mean, you're a keen traveller to France. The French don't have a national lottery. It's a completely alien process to the French because their opinion is if everybody's benefiting from a system, everybody should contribute to that system.
That's in a way true, but no government stands still. And in the last decade, there have been riots in the streets in France because the government is trying to diminish the cost to it of all that is required to be done. And only last week, in fact only yesterday, Sarkozy, the president, actually got through whatever the parliament that makes these decisions, I don't understand French politics well, but whatever body was required, got through Parliament a change in the legislation that prohibits anybody from working more than 35 hours. Because the egalitarian system that was brought in 15, 18 years ago, where there was a maximum 35 hours for all employees, is now costing the country dearly, and the government has managed to change that. They are not what we might call a universally social, and I don't mean socialist, a universally social government. They do sometimes have to move away from giving and do a bit more taking, and there have been riots in the streets about that.
Well, certainly this government seems to be keen on taking off the poor to give to the rich.
Well, that may or may not be so, and judging by what's happening in various parts of the country, it's easy to make that case. But to come back to congestion charging, in France, where they believe if it is for the common good, to use your term, it is free, I've just driven a very short distance in France, and it cost me €12. 6 one way, 6 the other, because I went on a busy road. You see, they already have road charging in France. Now, how do you quantify that, or how do you equate that against your statement that if it's for the common good, the state pays? They don't pay for motorways.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly don't know a way around it. But you look at referendum.
I'm not asking you to find a way around it. I'm asking you to explain your statement that in France the system is better because if it is required and it's for the common good, then the state pays. My argument is that motorways are actually quite essential to modern society, and they don't have any in France. They only have these private roads, which they call the equivalent of motorways, and you have to pay to use them.
Yeah, but you don't. Sometimes you could obviously get to and fro to where you wanted to get to without using a motorway.
I was merely addressing the point. And if you wanted to go from Paris to Lyon, and you wanted to do it without using the motorway, you would spend more on fuel because of your wriggly-raggly route than you would if you paid the congestion, paid the motorway charge and went direct. So I'm sorry, but in regards of motorised transport, France is less egalitarian than us.
But I still think, hopefully it'll be a non-starter unless they have a referendum overseen by Robert Mugabe. You never know.
Hey, don't put any ideas in the head, John.
We're a no-mark mean, are you?
Crikey, man, we don't want any of that. Good on you. Yeah, just as a matter of interest, will you be voting for or against?
Completely against.
Completely against. Thank you very much indeed. That's John in Wigan. Which way will you go? Which way will you vote? Yay or nay for the congestion charge? You're going to be given a referendum. The process, we don't yet know, other than it will be 10 different referenda, one in each of the 10 local authorities of Greater Manchester. And then it will be a yes-no, and it will be a straightforward one vote can win it, but then at least 7 of the authorities have got to vote in favour. This is my understanding of it. At least 7 of the local authorities have got to vote in favour for it to go ahead. Well, what's the chances of that happening? I've absolutely no idea. But at a guess, I think it's face down in the pond, don't you? But which way will you vote, and why will you vote that way? And if we don't do that, what do we do instead? If you don't have the congestion charge, we're not going to get certainly £1.5 billion worth of developments. That's half of the 3. We're not going to get £1.5 billion worth of developments. I don't know whether the government, and none of us know whether the government will still fund the first half of it, the £1.5 billion. No idea. Mitch suggests that essential workers shouldn't have to pay on their way to work and presumably on their way home. Mark from Cheadle asks by text, I work for the AA. Am I included in the essential services bracket or not? I suppose that depends on whether we've just broken down or not, Mark. But my guess is no. In fact, when Mitch was putting his point of view about the numbers of those who fall into the category of public services, he had to keep withdrawing it, didn't he? He had to keep making it smaller and smaller, till eventually it came down to just him and 2 doctors. But fair enough. What do you say? Would you vote for? Would you vote against? And is there some other way that many of us have not spotted? Is there some other way of getting congestion reduced in Greater Manchester? Is there some other way? I would be interested to know. 016, as indeed I suspect would be the authorities. 0161 228 2255. If you think you've got the answer, or indeed you just want to stab at it, give us a call. You can text as well on 07786206951. And, of course, the email address is radiomanchester@bbc.co.uk. 20 to 1. News headlines with Faye Rusco.
You will get the chance to vote on whether a congestion charge will be introduced across Greater Manchester. It's been decided within the last half hour to go ahead with a referendum in the 10 local authorities. Manchester Museum has reversed its decision to cover up its Egyptian mummies. It's after public feedback said it didn't think they should be hidden. And Gordon Brown is trying to reassure voters that he is listening to them in the wake of Labour's defeat in the Glasgow East by-election. Manchester's weather warm with the chance of some showers, highs of 25 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, I'm afraid that traffic's queuing up at the moment on the M6 southbound between 20 at Lymm and 19 at Knutsford. Again, the Friday rush starting fairly early again, but don't forget, of course, a lot of people are still making the way to the RHS Flower Show at Tatton Park. It's day 3. Gates open this morning at 10 o'clock, and it's still fairly slow on Knutsford Road. Not Knutsford Road, Chester Road in the Knutsford area, I should say, between the M6 Junction 19 Knutsford and Mearside Road. As I say, looking fairly heavy around that area as well at the moment. Taking a quick look to Wilmslow now, and Swan Street's closed off because of a gas leak between Manchester Road, Station Road and Church Street. So currently there's no access from Alderley Road or from Wilmslow Town Centre, and I'm afraid that work will continue over the coming weekend. Public transport all seems to be running to schedule. Don't forget though, if you can update me, then do get in touch on the travel line, which is 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Mark Elliott.
The billionaire Sir Allan Stanford is ploughing even more money into 2020 cricket, and as a result there's a huge incentive for the winners of tomorrow's 2020 final. England will warm up for their $20 million match with the Stanford Superstars later this year by playing the winners of this weekend's 2020 Cup. That game's one of 6 matches in an expanded Stanford Super Series event being held in the Caribbean. It's Essex, Kent, Middlesex and Durham who meet in the 2020 finals day tomorrow. Well, one of the world's top cricketing tournaments could be missing key players from a number of countries. The ICC have confirmed the Champions Trophy will be held in Pakistan, despite concerns from England, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa about security. The ECB will now consult its senior players, as there are suggestions that one or more of those countries could even opt out of the event. Well, it's going to be a tense afternoon at Old Trafford, with both Lancashire and Hampshire looking for the win on the last day of their county championship game. Chris Malaband is there.
It's advantage Hampshire so far on the final day after bowling Lancashire out for 155 in their second innings, with Imran Tahir picking up 7 for 66. They are now in pursuit of 225 to win this match. Tahir's had an outstanding game, picking up 5 wickets in the first innings and 7 in the second. Sutton for 8, Cork for 6 and Keady for a plucky 15. The Lancashire wickets to fall this morning. So 225 runs the target. Michael Brown and Sean Irvine have made a decent start so far. Irvine on 16, Brown yet to score, and Hampshire on 17 without loss. One other piece of news from Old Trafford: Oliver Newby's going down to Gloucestershire for a month's loan. That's been confirmed by cricket manager Mike Watkinson this morning, who said that Newby's going to get some first team cricket before the busy end of the season period, when he'll be required back at Lancashire for matches then. 17 without loss, Hampshire pursuing 225.
And there'll be updates from Chris throughout the afternoon here on BBC Radio Manchester. On to football now. The Manchester City manager Mark Hughes says he plans to sign a goalkeeper before the season gets underway. Joe Hart and Kasper Schmeichel are the only recognised keepers at the club following Andreas Isaksson's departure, and Hughes says he needs a third. The Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson will play a key role in his successor's appointment, according to the chief executive of the club, David Gill. Ferguson said he intends to step down in the next 2 or 3 years, and Gill believes Ferguson's knowledge of the club would be invaluable in naming the next manager. Wigan continue their pre-season preparations with a friendly against Hanover this evening. Steve Bruce's side have won 1 and lost 1 game on their tour of Austria so far. Bolton's recent signings Fabrice Muamba and Johan Elmander will make their debuts in tonight's pre-season visit to Rochdale, and Manchester Sports with Jack Dearden comes live from Scotland at 7 o'clock. Some other sports news in football. Everton captain Phil Neville signed a new 4-year deal with the club. The former Manchester United midfielder moved to Goodison in 2005. In rugby league, the St Helens second rower John Wilkins says newly promoted Celtic Crusaders now have a massive chance to raise the profile of rugby league in Wales. The RFL announced on Tuesday that the Crusaders would join Salford City Reds in the new Super League franchise from next season.
It's a brilliant decision for Celtic Crusaders and a massive chance for them to do something and really promote rugby league in Wales, which, to be honest, is more of a second or third interest to some people, you know, rather than a keen interest. So if Celtic Crusaders being in that league can get more children playing the game at schools, and, you know, I'm all for Celtic Crusaders being in Super League.
On to tennis. Andy Murray's back on court at the Toronto Masters today. He's playing Novak Djokovic in the quarter-finals. Djokovic is the defending champion and will be looking for his 6th straight win over Murray. On to athletics. Crystal Palace plays host to British athletes tonight for the final time before they depart for the Olympics in Beijing. Triple jumper Phillips Adowu, who's one of Team GB's brightest medal hopes, says the fact that big names like Asafa Powell, Usain Bolt and Alison Felix have made the trip could help the home athletes' performance.
It is a massive event. It is a big event. We've got a lot of international superstars competing there, and it'll be nice for the British public to see us do well, and hopefully for a lot of the younger athletes competing, they can take confidence from competing against the best athletes in the world and take that into the Olympic Games.
And finally, for now, in ice hockey, the Manchester Phoenix have signed Bruce Mulherin from the Las Vegas Wranglers.
Mornings sound better with Eamon O'Neill and Diane Oxbury.
Eamon and Diane.
How do you feel when you see people smoking in films? Because I've started to watch, from the beginning, Sex and the City. And one of the things that you notice about Carrie Bradshaw, Sarah Jessica Parker's character, the lead character is, in most scenes, she's got a fag in her hand.
Eamon and Diane and you.
What annoys me is these double bendy buses. They seem to be a lot longer and they cause a lot more traffic jams on the way in. The other thing is the Metrolink. Why can't they double the trams up?
The station with Eamon and Diane for breakfast.
Tell me about it, stud.
Back Monday morning at 6 at BBC Radio Manchester.
Yeah, very good day to you. How are you?
Allan Beswick, BBC Radio Manchester.
Good heavens. Yeah, I would vote no, says M. I would vote no as the outer ring road separates me from my parents. Free childcare for work days and things. Doctors, you have to be there at 8:30 to get an appointment. Midwife, hospital, local shops, family and friends, etc., etc., etc. I can't get a buggy, soon to be a double buggy on the bus, and refuse to get up at 4 a.m. to reach my job in St Helens by 8:30, dropping the kid off on the way just to use public transport. I do not want to pay to access my life. The charge area is too big. I would vote yes if it was just an inner ring road, but even the inner ring road already proposed covers an area that's too large. If it were just the ring road outside, round the city centre, I'd be happy. If I worked in Manchester, I would drive to drop my children off and then get the tram in. If you drive into Manchester from Prestwich down Bury Old Road or Bury New Road, you are bumper to bumper. If you drive in from Middleton down Oldham Road, it's fairly free ride, and the only congestion there has been caused by a little used bus lane that appears then disappears with no apparent purpose. I live in Middleton. I have had no form to register my view on the congestion charge. I think it is appropriate that we will all get a say. When I vote no and the congestion charge is brought in anyway, I shall whinge forevermore, says M. M, I think you will not be alone if you vote no and the vote goes no and then it's brought in anyway. You will not be alone in whinging forevermore. That is for sure. Alan, we do not need an organised, costly referendum to kick out the congestion charge. All we need to do is write no in big red letters across the information packs sent to every household and post them without a stamp to Councillor Richard Leese at Manchester Town Hall. Much cheaper, and it'll save a fortune. One worrying thing about the so-called improvements, says Jeff in Timperley, is that to get our transport system is that it's the people who've failed us over the past 20 years who will now be given the money and charged with the responsibility to succeed. Well, I don't know how else you get it done. The local authority can only ever be the people who will organise it. Can't be any other way, can it? If it was any other way, who would do it? You? Me? Jed says the way to solve it is to move all businesses out of Manchester city centre. There, the problem is solved. Well, yes, in one way, but of course all the people in Manchester city centre would have to go out of town to go to the shops. And there are already more businesses outside Manchester than there are inside Manchester, as it were. So I don't know that that's a solution. And if it were, if we, for example, put them all on Trafford Park, then great. Then we would have to have a congestion charge to get in and out of Trafford Park, or at least we'd have to have some process by which we could get to them or from them. I don't know. One of the questions, of course, will be, well, the question itself. What will the question be? What will be the question on the referendum? How would you word it? Because you can imagine the way they'll word it. And the reason I mention this is because Australia, about 4 or 5 years ago, Australia had a referendum, a national referendum, on whether to become a republic or whether to stay as a sovereign nation under Her Majesty the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. Our Queen, if you like, which is also the Queen of Australia. And the idea was that they would kick out the Queen and become a republic, with all that that entails. And the Australian people voted no. But everyone you spoke to, and I spoke to a lot of people in Australia at the time, everyone you spoke to said that they would have voted yes for a republic, except they didn't want the person who would have been president had they chosen to become a republic. They didn't want that person to be president. And the question was raised in such a way as not, do you want Australia to become a republic? But it was, do you want Australia to become a republic and for Joe Bloggs to be the president? So they did the two things in one. And people said, no, I want to be a republic, but not if we've got to have that clown running the joint. So the answer was no. It was a very cleverly worded referendum to make sure that it stayed a sovereign nation rather than a monarchy nation rather than a republic. And I wonder what the question will be on the referendum. Anything other than a straightforward, do you want the congestion charge to be brought in or do you not? So congestion charge, yes, no. That should be it. Do you want the congestion charge to be brought in? Yes. Do you want the congestion charge to be brought in? No. If they put the question like that, that's fair. Anything else, and I know what the councils will say. They'll say, well, we need to explain it all. No, you don't. You don't. When we go to the polls now and it says Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, BNP and all the rest of it, it doesn't say, do you want to vote Labour because they'll do this, this, this and this and this? Do you want to vote Conservative because they'll do this, this, this and this? Do you want to vote Lib Dem because they'll do this, this, this and this? Do you want to vote for the BNP because they'll do this, this and this? Do you want to vote for the Greens because they'll do this, this and this? It doesn't do any of that. It just says, Joe Bloggs, Labour. Mabel Bloggs, Conservative. Harry Bloggs, Lib Dem. Charlie Bloggs, that's what it says. And you vote for that. And you find out what they stand for in all the publicity that surrounds it. So it's got to be a very, very basic question. My money says it won't be. You tell me. 0161 228 2255. Frank says, these are my thoughts on my own poor redraw of the GMPTE map. Let me have a look. There's a GMPTE map. Let's have a look. Frank, it's a bit tricky to do. Oh, my God. He sent me a GMPTE map, for which I am indebted. And he also sends me a Word document, which my suspicion is he's got, it's 3 pages. Oh, no, it's not. I can't really deal with that in this process, unfortunately. 14 pages of text I can't read out. But Frank, thank you very much indeed. If you want to explain it, you know you're more than welcome. 0161 228 2255. What he does say is, how does one get a debate going? How do you get a debate going on the specifics of the proposed changes to public transport? Well, I don't know is the simple answer, because it is a complicated matter. How to end congestion? Ted in Moston, he's fairly straightforward about it, and it is this. Simply have a retarded one-way system that seems like it was designed by a chimpanzee, as in Oxford. Congestion would plummet overnight, or increase because people might not be able to get out of the system. I'll need to do more calculations, says Ted in Moston. Yes, the Oxford one is a particularly difficult one, I'll grant you that. Why are we to vote on the tax when I've heard the contract to run the trams for the next 10 years has already been awarded? That's John in Hazel Grove. I think the contract to run the trams has been awarded, yes, for the next 10 years, but we've already got trams, and so we need a contract to run those. I suspect that the contract has a clause within it saying that if the system expands, then the same firm will run that expanded system. But you can't not have a contract for the system we've already got. Phil in Boothtown, I understand that the congestion charge will only come in once the public transport improvements have been made. But what will happen when the PT, I don't know what that stands for because it's a text, what the PT scheme is over when they rush in and charge to cover the loss? PT, part-time? I've no idea what PT stands for. It is a problem with texts. If you don't send them in plain language, I can't always understand them, because I was taught English at school to a reasonably competent level. Unfortunately, they didn't teach us text, and I, for one, am extremely glad of that. 0161228 2255. I see the Liverpool player Steven Gerrard, like Ryan Giggs before him, has been awarded a university honorary degree. What's the point? Surely it sends the wrong message to the kids. Whether it sends the right or the wrong message to the kids, I don't know or care, but I do agree with your question. What is the point of honorary degrees? They are pointless, they are stupid, and frankly, anyone who accepts one diminishes, in my eyes, anyone who's prepared to don a stupid hat and a cloak and go and get an honorary degree, which they haven't earned. They haven't done all the work that one has to do to get a degree, and goes along and stands there on parade and gets a certificate handed to them by the Chancellor of the university or some other dignitary, and they say thank you very much. I think the whole process is completely and utterly pointless and ludicrous. David, our problem is that we travel into Manchester but live outside it. So we'll not have a vote, but we'll have to pay the charge. I say either everybody pays or nobody pays. Why should a bus passenger not pay? Just because a person doesn't own a car doesn't mean they have no money. Maybe bus and taxi passengers and car passengers as well could pay 50 pence per trip. And I object to funding what is a private company. And the other one is the AA chap may belong to Alcohol Anonymous. Well, I suppose he may. But I assumed it was the motoring one because we were talking motoring. But you're absolutely right. He may be lying there now, pissed as a fart, wondering what I was talking about. Anyway, there's a few doing that. 01612282255. If you live outside Manchester and travel in, it depends how far out you live, of course. I mean, I live outside Manchester and travel in, but I will get a vote because I still live within Greater Manchester. Remember, the referendum will be held within the overall boundary of Greater Manchester. It will be 10 different referenda, and frankly, that's a complicated way of doing it, but I can't think of another. So it'll be a 10 different referenda, the local authorities quite understandably insisting that they are able to hold referenda within their own borders. I don't even know that there is a political or an administrative structure to hold a Greater Manchester-wide referendum. I think the only way to do it, practically, is on the separate councils holding separate referenda. Hopefully, all on the same day, and expectedly all on the same day too.
They're called the City Girls. Could they be the next Spice Girls? Hear them in conversation with me, Stuart Barrett, tomorrow afternoon from 3.
No idea. If you've something to say today, whether it be about the congestion charge, the referendum, or indeed anything else at all, it's the usual number, 0161 228 2255. You can text and email as well.
95.1 FM.
DAB Digital Radio.
And the World Wide Web.
This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, to charge or not to charge, you decide.
Agma have decided today that they will have a referendum, and if 7 out of the 10 areas agree, then the congestion charge will come in.
And a Manchester Labour MP suggests Gordon Brown should go after a by-election disaster.
There's even more money going into 2020 cricket.
Well, this afternoon is going to be a warm one. We'll see some sunshine from time to time, but there is the risk of a thundery shower. Top temperatures 25 Celsius.
And again, it seems that the Friday rushes arrived early again today. It's already looking fairly busy on the M6 southbound between 20 at Lymm and 19 at Knutsford. Don't forget, if you are heading to the RHS Flower Show using that route southbound, make sure you allow yourself plenty of extra journey time.
Good afternoon, I'm Faye Rusco. So the decision is yours. Will Greater Manchester follow in London's footsteps and get a congestion charge? The 10 councils have decided that you get the casting vote, and there will be a referendum on the controversial plans which are linked to £3 billion worth of public transport improvements.
Agma have decided today that they will have a referendum, and they will count the referendums on a borough-by-borough basis, and if 7 out of the 10 areas agree and vote yes, then the congestion charge will come in.
That's Simon Ashley, the leader of Agma Council and of the Lib Dems on Manchester City Council. And we've been asking people where they'll be putting their X on their ballot box.
I'd vote against it. I mean, it's getting busier by the day, but it's not quite as busy as London, to be honest with you.
I'd probably vote for it, just because it would put funding into transport, which it needs.
I'd vote against it purely because I come into Manchester, 2 or 3 times a day, and most of the time it is when the congestion charge will be in use.
In theory, I think something should be done about the congestion, but I just don't agree with the way the charging's actually been worked out.
A Manchester MP says Labour needs a review of itself and to ask whether Gordon Brown should resign as Prime Minister in the wake of the party's latest by-election defeat. Graham Stringer says the Cabinet needs to have a frank discussion about the party's direction, or they're going to lose the next election.
It looks like a very difficult task to come back from being at the mid-20s in the opinion polls to win the next election. And in order to give us our best chance, I think we have to consider both the policy programme, which is confused, it's intellectually incoherent at the moment, and a question of leadership.
Engineers are looking at what caused a section of a plane's fuselage to come away mid-flight.
We first knew something was wrong when we heard an incredibly loud bang.
The Qantas aircraft was forced to make an emergency landing in the Philippines when a 3-metre section of its underbelly was ripped off. The plane was flying from London to Australia with more than 300 passengers and crew. Brandon McClements was on board.
The plane shuddered slightly. That was followed very rapidly by the decompression happening, which was essentially gusts of wind going back through the plane as the air was rushing out, and almost automatically at the same time as well, the oxygen mask dropped from the ceiling.
More than 1,200 people have been arrested in Greater Manchester in the last 2 months following a crackdown on burglars. It culminated with a day of action yesterday where known offenders were targeted. Superintendent Nadeem Butts says they intend to keep up the pressure.
Well, the message is that we are not going away. If you are going to commit burglaries within the Greater Manchester area, we are going to come after you, we're going to find you, we're going to arrest you, and we're going to put you in prison. What we had yesterday was a culmination of nearly 2 months of heightened activity by Greater Manchester Police, focusing very much on burglars.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Mark Elliott.
The billionaire Sir Allan Stanford's ploughing more of his cash into 2020 cricket. England already have a $20 million game against the Stanford Superstars in the Caribbean later this year. Now there'll be a warm-up tournament involving the winners of tomorrow's 2020 Cup final. Essex, Kent, Middlesex and Durham are competing for that. Meanwhile, the ICC's confirmed the Champions Trophy will be held in Pakistan, despite security concerns raised by England, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa. At Old Trafford, Lancashire and Hampshire are both going for the win on the last day of their county championship game. Chris Maliband is there.
Lancashire will be the ones enjoying their lunch much more. 26 for 2, Hampshire chasing 225 to win. Glenn Chappell has struck twice early in the Hampshire innings, sending back Michael Brown and John Crawley for ducks as Lancashire fight back. Hampshire early this morning reduced Lancashire to 155 all out. Imran Tahir's 7 for 66, the key performance with the ball, leaving Hampshire a gettable target. But Lancashire will be delighted with that mini session before lunch. 26 for 2, Hampshire at lunch, chasing 225.
And some other news from Old Trafford. The Lancashire seamer Oliver Newby has gone to Gloucestershire on loan. In football, Wigan continue their pre-season preparations with a friendly against Hanover this evening. And in tennis, Andy Murray's back on court at the Toronto Masters today. He's playing defending champion Novak Djokovic in the quarter-finals.
BBC Radio Manchester satellite weather with Heather Stott.
Well, this afternoon is going to be a warm one. We have got plenty of sunshine around, so some really nice spells of sunshine, but we do have some cloud around as well, and that's going to make the sunshine hazy from time to time, and eventually in places it will thicken enough to bring us 1 or 2 showers, and those showers could turn out to be quite sharp, and we could hear the odd rumble of thunder. Top temperatures today, 25 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
So there he is, minding his own business. Painter and decorator Gordon Williams. Driving along in his van. Only him ever uses it. It's his van. It's a work van, but it's his van. He's driving along, minding his own business. He's self-employed, works on his own. And he's on his way to the shop to get some tea bags. The relevance of the tea bags is nil. So on his way, he thinks, well, I feel like a fag. So he lights up. And he gets stopped. Council officials flagged his van down and handed him a fixed penalty notice under the anti-smoking laws. He's in the works van, his van, there's only him uses it, and he got done. He says, I'm dumbfounded. The van is only insured for private use and to get me to and from work. It's not my place of work. I paint and decorate houses, not vans. I don't use it for work, so I can't see how they can do me for smoking in the workplace. Now, first of all, his excuse is a bit rich. He doesn't use it for work, so what does he do? Does he have another van that he takes his paint and his paintbrushes to the job in? Or does he take them on the bus and leave the van at home? I think he's pulling a flanker there. He does use it for work. He presumably takes his paint and brushes and all the other gubbins, ladders and all that crap to work in the van. But he doesn't work in the van, does he? No. So, should he have been done? And just for the record, the Daily Mirror tells us that the Himalayan kingdom of Bhutan banned the sale and or use of tobacco entirely in 2004. How far do you think we are from a ban on the use of tobacco products? Full stop. We outlaw them like cocaine. And like cocaine, it'll make no difference. Or heroin. Like cocaine or heroin, it'll make absolutely no difference. They ban it, there'll be plenty about. Phil in Boothtown tells me that PT, if you were listening before the 1 o'clock news, he used the 2 letters PT in a text. I didn't know what it meant. I should have guessed, really, but I didn't, Phil. Public transport is what PT stood for in that text. I was suggesting that the government-funded part will go over budget, so the congestion charge will be rushed in earlier than planned to cover for the shortfall. Well, you may be right, who can say? The way things are going, from all I've heard, is the congestion charge is dead. We're going to have a referendum to decide where to bury it. Stuart in Lymm. Perhaps they'll buy it a gravestone off Bolton Market. Stuart in Lymm, what you got?
Hello, Alan.
Hiya, mate.
Right, just an idea. You hear lots of this talk about the congestion charge, and I'm not that bothered about it. I don't drive into Manchester at 9 o'clock in the morning because I'm not daft enough. and if I was to drive into Manchester at 9 o'clock in the morning, it would be an important, be doing it for a good reason, and I'd happily pay. But I don't think it's fair. I think it's a tax. Now, to ease congestion, you hear lots of people saying, well, what else is there? I think you were saying about it before. My idea is to have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit everywhere within the M60. You can have your speed cameras everywhere, get some money for that, and instead of traffic hurtling into the town centre at 50 mile an hour and congesting there, it's congesting in a 10-mile ring. So it'll be petered out, and there'd just be a lot less congestion, a lot less pollution, everything that they're supposedly trying to achieve.
My instant response to that is that you don't get anything like 20 miles an hour coming into Manchester or going out of Manchester during the peak periods. I personally don't travel at those times, but for my sins, and they must have been big ones, I had to go to the Trafford Centre yesterday, and I left the Trafford Centre at 4:15 to come along just a very short part of the M60 to then go off homewards to Atherton. My average speed from the Trafford Centre to when I got off the M60 was considerably less than 20 miles per hour, whatever the speed limit. So in the congested hours, 20 mile an hour is a hell of a speed. And frankly, it would be rare that you'd get up to that speed on any parts of our road system in the rush hour.
This could be why they call it the traffic centre.
No, they call it the Trafford Centre, but it's a nice trick. But I mean, the point I'm making is that the whole of the M60 and all the roads, all the arterial roads, inward or outward, depending on time of day, you've the devil's own job to get to 20 miles per hour. So that won't change anything. They're already going.
Make it 10.
Well, if you made it 3, in many cases, it'd still be faster.
It'd still be faster.
Because it's almost walking pace at times coming into town. So I'm not sure. And that may well, if you allowed that speed limit to exist the 24 hours per day, it would certainly discourage people from having cars, perhaps. But I don't know. It's a thought, though. It's a very good thought. You're thinking. I think the modern parlance, and I hate myself for saying it, but you are at least thinking outside the box, Stuart.
Well, this is the thing. There is no easy answer, and I'm sure greater minds than ours have churned this over. And
Stuart, you must speak for yourself, sir. There is no greater mind than mine. It's a good thought. Good on you. The idea that the congestion charge is a tax, of course it is. All monies taken by government are taxes. BBC licence fee, it's a tax. Your national insurance, it's a tax. Your road fund licence, it's a tax. They're all taxes. There's no way round that. Even commercial radios paying for their franchise, it's a tax. And you're absolutely right in that. The congestion charge would be a tax. Nothing else, just a tax.
Well, we agree on something.
Yeah, something's gone wrong. I should change your mind if you're agreeing with me, mate. Have a good day. Go on.
Oh, and I was about to say, quickly flying off at a tangent, I remember in the winter you were saying about you were trying to buy a coal scuttle and couldn't find them anywhere.
I could not.
I own a little hardware store, and I'm sat here looking at a range of coal scuttles.
A range of coal scuttles, my word. Well, we shall all dash around immediately.
Please don't do that. I'll put my feet up.
Good on you, mate. Cheers.
And yourself home.
Have a good day. 0161 228 2255. And yes, Trafford Centre and thinking outside the box in the space of 24 hours. The boy can change. The boy can change. I can keep up with the world in all its strange mores. 0161 228 2255. Neil says, this is what will happen over congestion charging. It will be introduced across all the major cities in the UK. People will start to get very miffed off and will cry out because they're having to pay full tilt to go into A zone if they want to if they just want to cut across it, pass through it, nip in or out of a particular zone. The government will agree on this point of it being unfair to pay in full just to nip into the zones, and will put us forward a system that offers a way of paying just for what you use. The system will be called road tolling or pay as you go. The whole point to congestion charging is to get road tolling on the books. It's that straightforward and simple. The EuroGP satellites for the tolling system started being put up 3 years ago. The system should be ready for deployment sometime in 2015. As I understand it, Neil, those satellites are already up and already up and running in great chunks of Europe. Certainly, we know that from your satellite navigation in the UK. I've just been to France, and for the second time, I've used my ordinary sat-nav to get around France. So it's already there. And the sat-nav system, yes, it would have to be adjusted administratively in order to raise money, but the sat-nav system is already in existence. So I'm sorry, I don't know what point you're making other than yes, it will happen. Sorry, Alan, but he's a bloody fool for stopping. Oh, I see. This is the man with the fag. The cigarette in his van. Sorry, Alan, but he's a bloody fool for stopping. Since when have council officials had the power to stop moving vehicles? My van, smoke away, says Daz in Bolton. Congestion? Of course there's congestion, and it will only get worse as long as we keep letting every Tom, Dick, Harry and his dog into the bloody country. We just can't cope with the population. Gary in Norwich. Arthur in Gorton. Hiya, Arthur.
Hello, young man.
Good day to you, sir.
Have you had a nice holiday?
Fabulous, thank you.
Now, congestion charge.
Go on.
What about the monorail?
Go on, what about the monorail?
Well, they should have done all that years ago. They built Manchester up and fancy putting a tram down Mosley Street. One of the narrowest streets in Manchester, while he was away, just before he went away, the tram turned over and there's nothing been said about it, what's happened since. And this is how they carry on. All they've done, they've congested the city fathers. They're all sat there in the top office there, talking about building underground car park. What a load of rubbish, Alan. I mean that.
Well, what could they have done instead? There is no escaping that you're right in that the city fathers, and I think they would consider themselves to be successful. The city fathers have caused congestion in that they have made Manchester an attractive place for people to come to work, to shop, to visit.
But Alan, they have never widened a road in my lifetime. Look at Kingsway, that's all. What a load of damn rubbish, honest to God, all over the city. And Gorton is one of the worst areas at this moment in time. We'll get nothing out of the congestion charge. We're only a load of bloody earache. Excuse me, swear, I shouldn't do that.
Don't worry.
No, I want them all.
It's all right.
You see, I could go out of here and get a bus or a tram into Salford to Swinton. I can't do it now. I've got to get off at Piccadilly. Everybody, honest to God, it's up to... And as far as the buses are concerned, Salford always made it pay. Manchester didn't, but Salford did. And it was one of the best services that was going. And I mean that.
But you can't blame the local authorities, and there are 10 in Greater Manchester, you can't blame the local authorities for what's happened with the buses. That was a government decision 20 years ago to privatise them. Now,
the gas, electric.
Well, absolutely so.
Yeah.
The government made its decision. I know for a fact that the local authorities in this area, all of them, all 10 of them, were absolutely dead against the privatisation of buses. Absolutely dead set against. But they don't get a say. That's a government decision. Now, the local authorities have to work with the systems that the government give them. And I don't know that they are able to improve the bus services. They haven't the money to do it. Even if they get the money, they're not allowed to raise it by taxation. Even if they got the money, they wouldn't be allowed to do it. So, given that they have the rules they have, given that their hands are tied in the way they are, what can they do?
Yeah. Could you answer me one question?
I'll do my best, Arthur.
Could you tell me where the city centre is?
Well, it depends. It depends, first of all, which city you mean. Do you
Manchester
mean? Okay. The simple way of answering that is with a no, because there are a variety of ways of deciding what is the centre.
Now, somebody should know, shouldn't they?
Well, no one will be able to give you a definitive answer. But go on, explain.
You see, same as what they put the new bus place down in Hewdale, and it's only a few yards from damn Salford. Are you with me?
Well, yes, that is the problem. If you mean the geographic centre, I can tell you how you find the geographic centre of a place if you're interested. You get a piece of cardboard.
Now, Alan.
What?
I'm partially blind, so...
OK, but I'm telling you how to do it. I'm not saying that perhaps you can do it. But to find the geographic centre of any place, you get a piece of cardboard, you trace the boundary of that place, whether it's Manchester, Greater Manchester or Czechoslovakia, you trace the boundary of that place onto the cardboard, you then cut out the cardboard along the boundary and all the way round, so that you've got a piece of card that is the shape of the boundary of the place you're trying to find the centre of. Then you get a pin and you balance the card on the pin. And when it finally balances, it'll take a while, but when it finally balances, that point is the geographic centre of that area.
I see.
But it won't be the active centre very often, like you say. The active centre, the city centre in our terms of Manchester, is of course over to the west of the whole of Manchester.
I see.
What a lot of places say, when you get a reference on a destination board, say in Manchester 25 miles, the 25 miles is usually, not always, but usually to the town hall. All right, so that's 3 different centres you've got already.
Alan.
Go on.
I can hardly get my bloody breath. But, you see, if I leave Gorton and I can't get down, I've got to get off and get on another damn bus. I know it's free of charge for me. That's beside the point. Are you with me?
Yeah. Well,
here's one point.
But you sound, Arthur, like a person who would benefit from improvements in public transport, and they will come, we are told, providing people vote for the congestion charge, which we'll have to see. It's 1:20 0161 228 2255. Faye Rusco has the headlines.
Well, you will get the chance to vote on whether a congestion charge will be introduced across Greater Manchester. It's been decided within the last couple of hours to go ahead with a referendum in the 10 local authorities. The Manchester MP Graham Stringer says Labour needs to ask whether Gordon Brown should resign as Prime Minister in the wake of the party's latest by-election defeat in Glasgow. And the energy firm EDF has announced more price rises. It's putting electricity charges up by 17% and gas by 22%. Manchester's weather warm with the chance of some showers, highs of 25 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, let's take a look to the M6 firstly, and if you're using that stretch between 20 at Lymm and 19 at Knutsford, expect to be slowed down. It's looking fairly hectic on camera, queuing up at the moment between those 2 junctions. Don't forget, though, of course, it's the first day of the school holidays today for a number of schools around the area, so a lot of people will be making their way across the country to various destinations for the summer period, so watch out for those delays there. And, of course, a lot of people still making their way to the flower show at Tatton Park. It's day 3 today. So, as you should imagine, traffic around that area looking fairly busy at the moment. And if you're heading through Wilmslow on Swan Street, it's still closed off between Manchester Road and Church Street because of a gas leak. Emergency repairs are underway, but currently there's no access from Alderley Road or from Wilmslow Town Centre, and work will continue over the coming weekend. Don't forget, if you can update me further, though, why not call in on the travel line on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
Your Sunday morning lie-in with Mike Shaft.
Where is the Church of England at the moment?
We're in a very difficult position trying to hold on to people as best we can, and the Church of England somehow has got to hold that tension and find a way forward through debate and discussion.
Mike Shaft.
Why don't more people understand the possibility that faith could have a positive outcome?
The reason we're out every night of the week, come rain or shine, is it's our faith. We're following Christ.
Manchester's faith, spirit, and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
Look at the big picture.
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
Follow Christ, you'll end up at the top of a hill with a nail through your hand. 0161 228 2255. David says, Alan, my worry about the congestion charge referendum, he calls it the con charge, which may be more relevant than we thought. My worry about the congestion charge referendum is that the pro-charge lobby seem to get a lot more favourable media than the anti-charge lobby. Plus, their campaign will have a limitless budget. Well, I don't know about the budgets of the respective campaigns. It will be interesting to see. But talking of limited budgets, if they were permitted to do so, I suspect that Peel Holdings, that have an almost bottomless pit of money, would spend every penny they've got to prevent the congestion charge. So I don't think it's going to be plain sailing for the pro-lobby. And reading lots of media and being part of the media, I don't think the pro-lobby do get a better media, more favourable media response or reports than the anti. I think it's been fairly even balanced. I can't speak for this programme because I can have my say, but I have no control over the balance of this because it's who calls, who texts, who emails. So this is slightly different, but generally I think the media overall has been fairly impartial. I think. I could be wrong. It'd be interesting to know what you think. What do you think? How has the media, not just us, but the media generally, how have they been handling it in terms of giving both sides a fair point of view, a fair crack of the whip, I think is the phrase. You tell me. I'll be interested. Dave in Salford. Hiya, mate.
Hi, Alan.
What have you got?
I heard you talk to the other chap about the centre of Manchester.
Yeah, where is it?
Well, I can remember I listened to a programme somewhere, and it was, quite an official programme. It wasn't just like someone saying it. But what I can remember is, like, the class of St Anne's Church as a centre of Manchester. You know, when you get these signs on the motorway, say, like, 14 miles to Manchester and all that.
Yeah.
They use St Anne's Church as the point, from and to kind of thing.
That would be the point that people would understand as being as the centre.
Yeah, and that's the one that they seem to use for, like, motorways and...
Well, you could so very easily be right.
I just don't remember I heard it, but I definitely heard it on some kind of official programme.
Oh, well, Lee's just sent me a text saying much the same thing. Alan, the centre of Manchester is the corner of St Anne's Church in St Anne's Square. So you're absolutely right, if indeed you and Lee are not in cahoots to trick me. I trust nobody.
You don't mean mate Lee, do you?
Hey?
You don't mean my mate Lee, do you?
It's a posse. They've got a posse up. Oh dear God. But yeah, it may well be. But that's the strange thing, isn't it? Because I can remember a lad who come to work here. He'd only ever worked in Scotland, born and bred in Scotland, never been out of Scotland, and he came to work for us here at the BBC in Manchester. Never been to London. This was his first time in Manchester. The BBC did what they do, and that sent him on a course. And he said, "Where's the BBC in London?" And I said, "Well, it's in city centre London." And he said, "And will there be signs to the city centre?" I said, "Oh yeah, you follow them, Ross, you'll be all right." I think he's still looking. But we don't know. When you're driving down the motorway and it says Gloucester, 14 miles.
Well, it depends what point. It could be the outskirts.
It could be anywhere, couldn't it, really?
Yeah,
anywhere, as long as it's got Gloucester in the postcode.
It's just like they've picked some kind of official landmark and that's it.
Yeah, but we don't know which one it is. It's not universal. Because if they said, I suggested that many of them, and it is true that many of them are the town hall, but the town hall of many, many places is not in the centre anymore.
Well, that's it. And it's like Salford Town Hall ain't far from Manchester Town Hall, really.
That's true.
It's kind of, but the centres are nowhere near each other. Well, yeah, in a way, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Well, no, but I think, as I say, St Anne's Church is ground zero, apparently, you know what I mean?
Ground zero's a phrase I could have done without. Good on you, Dave.
It should be.
Thank you very much indeed. I think I mentioned this before I went away, but for the first time, I've not done it before, I wandered into St Anne's Square. I had 20 minutes to kill in the city centre, saw it. I like old buildings. I went into the St Anne's Church. It's absolutely fantastic. It really is a superb old building. Wonderful. But whilst I was away, I went to a place called Grasse it's just northwest of Nice, and I went to a place called Grasse just to have a look round, and I went into the cathedral there. It is the most startling church, religious building I've ever been in. Anyway, no Sistine Chapel type building, I'll grant you, but absolutely extraordinary. And there's a hole or an indentation in the wall outside. or in the exterior wall, and the indentations outside, and it's where a cannonball hit it during a siege hundreds of years ago, and they've just left this indentation, and all the bricks are loose on the inside. Very strange indeed. Dave in Salford was just talking to Ray in Bellevue. Hiya, Ray.
Hello, Alan, how are you?
I'm very well, sir. What can we do for you?
Well, I've recently joined the Labour Party, but I'm disillusioned already.
Good Lord.
Well, you see, the thing is this. I paid my membership, and, well, I'm expected to do that, I agree with that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I got a phone call 2 to 3 weeks later asking me to pay by direct debit my membership.
Yeah.
I didn't agree to this. And I'm afraid, really, nobody's been asking me my point of view or anything. I've not been really welcomed, and really, I think most of the political parties, all of them, they want your money. And also, my dad, when he was alive, he gave me his trade union cards and his badge, a gold badge he got for long service of the union. And he was paying, the late 40s, he was paying 2 shillings and 6pence. And that was a lot of money in those days. And you see, the unions made sure they got their fair whack of it as well. So the thing is, I think that we should keep our money for ourselves. The thing is, the Tory party are the same. They're not interested in what you think. They only want your money.
Well, they do, I suppose, want your money because they can't operate without it. The reason the political parties want you to pay by direct debit is because they get to spend more of the money you give them on what you give it them for rather than administration, because administrating money is a very expensive process, and the least expensive way is direct debit. I don't know what welcome you were expecting. I don't think Gordon Brown was going to come round and give you a hug. What did you expect you would get from the Labour Party by well of a welcome when you joined?
Well, I thought we might have a discussion about my opinions. I'm a new member, but I was talking to a friend, and he said the guilt squad moving. They try to make you feel guilty for not giving them money, and they make you think, well, we've got to do this because we've got to do this for the working class. We're in trouble if we don't do this, and get you agitated, you know.
But I think it's fair for a political party to presume, if you've taken the trouble to join them, that you in some way agree. Not with every policy they've got. No one agrees with every policy.
No.
But you agree with the overall thrust of what it is they're attempting to do. So you have already taken part in that debate in making that decision, haven't you? One presumes you didn't pick the party with a pin.
No, I've been thinking about it for years. I was with the Communist Party, you see, and well, they're almost defunct now, and people have rejected it around the world to a great extent. The working class have rejected it to a great extent around the world. And really, I do really believe that there must be democracy with socialism. Social democracy, it might be the way forward.
I'm interested that you think social democracy is the way forward and you join the current Labour Party, which has got absolutely no contact with socialism at all, but no matter.
Yes, I know. I think my joining was an emotional tug, really, of feeling like, well, my father and my uncle, they were the election agents for the first Labour MP in Cornbrook Ward in Old Trafford in 1945.
Good Lord.
And the candidate wouldn't have got elected without the people who voted for him. But I felt an emotional tug. Perhaps I should give it a bit longer. Give it a chance.
Well, give it a chance, yeah, you never know. It's only had 100 years, a couple more months won't do you any harm, will it? Good on you, Ray.
Bye-bye.
Cheers, mate. You don't meet many of them people who've joined the Labour Party. There's no difficulty in finding people that have kicked it into touch, but there's not many that have just joined. 0161 228 2255. Labour are on course to lose the next election. I predicted some months ago that they couldn't lose because the statistics and mathematics and arithmetic were impossible to overcome, which for the time being looks like it's going to put me in my place and prove once again that I know sweet Fanny Adams. Alan referenced the painter and decorator, says Tony. As a non-smoker, it's a dirty, filthy habit, so my opinion is it's a fair cop. Thought: why do smokers always leave their windows wide open when sat in the car smoking and driving? Surely if they kept the windows closed, they'd be able to maximise on their horrible smoking experience. Finally, smoking while driving is just as bad as driving whilst using a mobile phone. But how bad is driving and using a phone, which is smouldering, if not smoking? Neil in Bolton. Hiya, Neil.
Good morning, Alan. I just don't believe in a referendum for this Manchester job anyway, because, you know, to ask people do they want to pay more money for anything, the answer is no, and it's like really asking a turkey if they're looking forward to Christmas. I mean, it's just not a real thing to do to ask people to part with money, because they won't. Leaders have got to lead, and that's what it's all about. And I've got nothing else to say about it. It's just a referendum when you're asking people for money, and especially in the present climate.
When you say leaders have got to lead, it's very difficult. You imagine, I mean, Sir Richard Leese, the leader of Manchester City Council, is very definitely in favour of the referendum charge, but he's not the leader because he cannot impose his view, for want of a better term, on Trafford or on Wigan or on Oldham. So in this particular field, in this particular region, we don't have anyone who can make the decision and enforce it on everybody. Now, if the local authorities were universal, if all 10 local authorities said, yes, it's a good idea, we wouldn't be getting a referendum.
No.
But some of them are against it as an authority.
Well,
I don't know how we go forward with that, because there isn't anyone who can dominate the other 9.
No, fair enough, but if their rules are it's got to be unanimous, and if one objects, then fine.
Well, it's not their rules, it's just that they are 10 separate organisations, and you can't have a referendum for everyone in Greater Manchester bar Salford. You can't do that. You can't have a congestion charge for everybody in Greater Manchester bar Salford or bar Oldham.
Supposing they say yes to the referendum, are they just going to trample through that council's land anyway?
Well, yes, in that. What has happened, and some democracy has gone on here, the leaders have sat down together, the 10 leaders, and said, look, we've got to find a way of getting past this stumbling block of some of us are for, some of us against. So they've come up with what they think is a democratic solution, and that is, providing we can get 70%. Now, 70%'s an odd number. Usually, when you're talking about constitutional change, you go for 2/3, which is not far from 70%. It's not far, it's 66%. But they say if 7 out of the 10, that's 70%, yeah? If 7 out of 10 of authorities vote for it, we'll have it, because it's almost a constitutional change.
Well, they're asking people for money and they won't get it. I mean, I agree that they should have it, actually, but I mean, they won't get it because they're asking people for money, and the answer to that is no.
But the great problem is that they can't, there isn't a way of imposing it, is there? Unlike the...
They have to try and persuade that of the council by means and methods that eventually they will. Either by bribery or something.
Bribery, I'm glad you didn't say and corruption, but whatever it takes. Good on you. It's a very good point. I mean, you're actually mouthing words that I've said many, many times. I want my politicians to say, this is what I believe. If you don't like it, don't vote for me.
Well, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
In fact, that other chap you had on a little while ago saying they've not widened the road in Manchester in his lifetime. Can you imagine trying to widen any of those major roads?
It would be a bit tricky. How do you break the news to these 4,000 different companies that were knocking your buildings down?
Take you about 100 years to get it through court.
Absolutely. It'd be extraordinary.
Fine, Alan, that's great.
Good on you, mate.
Bye.
We should have done what Edinburgh did, and that is never let them build narrow roads. As a lifelong Labour supporter, says David, I am concerned about the result of yesterday's Glasgow by-election. I read some time ago that without the votes from Scotland, we would never have had a Labour government. I wonder how much different our country would have been today without ever having a Labour government. Maybe Thatcher would have been considered a moderate. Actually, compared to the current so-called Labour government, Thatcher was a moderate. There are things that Thatcher wouldn't even have dreamed of doing because they were too right-wing that the current government has done. Evelyn in Stockport. Hi, Alan. Are we still going to be discussing the congestion charge in 5 years' time when it's supposed to start? £2.50 will most likely be worth next to nothing by then. I don't drive, but if I did, I wouldn't moan about it. If you can afford a car, the petrol, the MOT, the insurance, the repairs, etc., the congestion charge is a drop in the ocean. By the way, welcome back. Thank you for the welcome and indeed for the point of view. 0161 228 2255. If you've something to say, that's fine. It's 20 to 2, which is a good time to find out what's going on, and Rachel Ferguson knows.
You will get the chance to vote on whether a congestion charge will be introduced across Greater Manchester. It's been decided this morning to go ahead with a referendum in the 10 local authorities. The Manchester MP Graham Stringett says Labour needs to ask whether Gordon Brown should resign as Prime Minister in the wake of the party's latest by-election defeat. And the energy firm EDF has announced more price rises. It's putting electricity charges up by 17% and gas by 22%. Manchester's weather warm with a chance of some showers, highs of 25 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Well, Tom's just been in touch on the travel line to report some busy traffic on the A58 to the East Lancs Road in the Astley area. Now, apparently there's some barrier repair works underway either side of the carriageway. It's heaviest heading towards Manchester with 2 miles of queuing traffic. So do keep those calls coming in if you are heading along that stretch of the carriageway. Taking a quick peek to cameras on the M6 southbound, and it's still queuing between 20 at Lymm and 19 at Knutsford. And if you're heading through Wilmslow, Swan Street still closed off because of that gas leak earlier on this week. Emergency repairs are still underway between Manchester Road and Church Street, but currently there's no access from Alderley Road or Wilmslow Town Centre, and work will continue this weekend. Don't forget, if you can update me further, call in if you can on the travel line on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Mark Elliott.
Starting with cricket, and the winners of tomorrow's 2020 Cup will be invited to play in what will be called the Stanford Super Series in the build-up to the £10 million match between England and a Caribbean Select 11 sponsored by the American billionaire Sir Allan Stanford. Meanwhile, the defending champions Australia could join New Zealand, South Africa and possibly England in pulling out of September's ICC Champions Trophy in Pakistan. It's all to play for on the final day of Lancashire's county championship match with Hampshire. Chris Malaband is there.
We've just resumed after lunch at Old Trafford. Hampshire 26 for 2 in pursuit of 225 to win this county championship fixture. Sean Irvine on 25, Michael Lum yet to score. Lancashire will be delighted though with that short period of play before lunch. Just 8 overs possible in the Hampshire second innings, and Michael Brown and John Crawley both dispatched by Glen Chappell, neither of them managing a run. Earlier this morning, Imran Tahir completed an excellent debut for the South Coast County. He took 7 for 66 in Lancashire's second innings, including the wickets of Sutton for 8, Cork for 6 and Keady for 15 this morning, as Lancashire's second innings closed on 155 all out. That set Hampshire 225 to win. It's going to be an intriguing afternoon. Both sides will fancy the victory. 26 for 2, Hampshire.
And you can keep up to date with Lancashire's progress here on BBC Radio Manchester throughout the afternoon. Meanwhile, the Lancashire seamer Oliver Newby's moved to Gloucestershire on a month-long loan starting on Monday. He goes straight into their squad for the County Championship Division 2 fixture against Worcestershire. That starts next Wednesday. On to football, the FA's confirmed that Fabio Capello plans to continue as England coach until the end of his contract in 2012. A newspaper in Italy's quoted Capello as saying he planned to quit after the 2010 World Cup finals. Nigeria's Olympic football coach Samson Siasia has warned his players that he expects short hair and correct clothing for the Beijing Games. He believes that his players are devoting too much time to their elaborate hairstyles. No problem for that. In Rugby League, Wigan will be looking to strengthen their position in the top 6 of Super League tonight when Huddersfield Giants are the visitors to the JJB Stadium. The Warriors coach Brian Noble expects the Giants to be tough opposition after narrowly beating them earlier in the season.
They're durable, they're tough. They've got a lot of ex-Wigan players in their team, 6, so they'll be out to prove a point, and it's important that we recognise that, so they're going to be very enthusiastic. I think Hudson offers a lot around the ruck, and I think with Thorman and Robinson in their halves, I think they're going to prove a real handful.
And there's commentary on Wigan against Huddersfield Giants in Manchester Sports with Jack Dearden tonight from 7. Newcastle have persuaded the Leeds Rhinos England wing Danny Williams to switch from Rugby League to Union and join the Falcons. The 21-year-old made his England debut against France last year. And finally for now, in tennis, Andy Murray is in quarter-final action at the Toronto Masters later today. He'll play the defending champion, Novak Djokovic.
Life and laughs with Eamon and Jimmy.
Went to a funeral on Tuesday. Caught the bouquet. I know. It was my Auntie Nellie. She worked in that furniture factory up Cheetah Mill. She fell in that great big vat of varnish. Horrible death, that was, yeah. Lovely finish, though, wasn't it?
Eamon and Jimmy and you.
What was your first car, Gainer?
A Triumph Toledo.
Oh, a Triumph Toledo. They were quite...
It had a walnut dash.
I was going to say I had a walnut dash.
Yeah.
Did it have a walnut whip?
If your radio sounds funny on Sunday morning, you must be listening to Eamon O'Neill and Jimmy Wagg.
It's kind of hard to put it in words.
Sunday morning from 9.
At BBC Radio Manchester.
But they somehow manage, don't they? It's 1:45. According to the Daily Mail and one or two other papers this morning, there's been a 40% fall in prescriptions as GPs shun homeopath cures. Good. I don't see why I should pay for a bottle of water for some bugger else just because some clown thinks it might do them good. It's just gone 1:45. Sean in Trafford. Hiya, Sean.
Hello, how are you?
Not bad. What have you got?
Well, I'm just really sort of talking about the referendum, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the organisation I started, Manchester Against Road Tolls, it's what we've been campaigning for a year or more, and I'm just glad that Manchester's finally got the chance to decide on this properly.
OK, I follow that. You're clearly against it, so we'll be voting against it. I understand that. Do you have any... I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, but do you have anything constructive to offer in terms of how we might reduce congestion in Greater Manchester?
Yeah, I think what we need to look is, if we look at London, a very significant thing happened where Boris Johnson abandoned the hierarchical transport mode system. Now, basically, that means you have you prioritise the different modes of transport in order, with pedestrians at the top and cars right down at the bottom. And that system that's sort of existed around the country is basically mean that you get all sorts of ways of taking road space away from traffic, away from cars, which is basically cause a lot of the congestion that we've got in Manchester. I think we should do the same.
You're talking about pedestrianisation, putting the Metrolink on the road rather than elsewhere, or, I don't know, a super rail or whatever, or even an underground, but taking road space off vehicles and giving it to the exclusive or almost exclusive use to pedestrians. Would you therefore reverse the pedestrianisation of central Manchester?
I wouldn't say that the pedestrianisation of areas is so much of a problem.
Okay, then what?
The Metrolink.
Okay, what do you mean then by the removal of road space in favour of pedestrians?
I think what we need to do is look at the capacity that bus lanes carry.
Right.
And if they carry less capacity than the general traffic lane next to them, then really the bus lane shouldn't be there.
In terms of moving people from point A to point B, That's an isolated way of looking at things, but in those terms, clearly you're absolutely correct. It may well be. I don't know the figures, but let us say we did a count, and we learned that coming into Manchester along a particular road, 20,000 people came by car, and 15,000 came by bus. Then clearly you give priority in your system to the car. The consequence of that might be that you end up with 30,000 coming in by car and 10,000 by bus. Whereas, if you say, well, OK, if we carry this system on, we will force people out of the car onto the bus, and that is, in terms of pollution, goes the argument, a better thing for the world as a whole.
I think the pollution argument, to be honest, I think is a red herring. The state of, or the speed that technology is improving, not just in cars but in buses as well, means that by, I think, 2020, pollution from traffic won't be an issue. And I think to start making...
What evidence have you got to support that? I'm not asking you for a scientific thesis, but what evidence is there that pollution is in some way going to diminish? We've got it to the stage where it just might level out for the time being, but that makes no allowance for the increased number of vehicles. That's the big crush, isn't it? You can improve the if you like, you can improve the environmental concept, or the environmental consequences of the vehicle itself, but we have a burgeoning number of vehicles.
If you look at, I think really what we have to do, you have to define what pollution particularly causes risk to health. And you're talking but primarily you're talking particulates, PM10s, and you're talking nitrogen oxide.
Yep.
Both of those have decreased in the last 20, 30 years 100-fold. And they're set to continue.
When you say, I'm only asking, I don't know the answer, I hope you do. When you say they have decreased, do you mean they've decreased on the whole as a collective sum, or that they've decreased per vehicle?
Both. In the case of nitrous oxides and PM10s, both. I've seen the figures. If you look at a bus as young as, say, an L-Reg bus, that kicks out around 400 times more nitrous oxide than the latest bus does. Now, there's not 400 times more buses on the road, nor is there 400 times more cars on the road. So, yes, there's been a significant decrease, both individually per car and in total.
OK. Now, if we accept those figures, and I'm not in a position or inclined to challenge them, but if we accept those figures, fine. But we then have to look from now, rather than from 10, 15, 20 years ago, and say, well, OK, we've made those improvements per vehicle, and therefore collectively now, but can we continue with that downward trend? Do we have, you know, it's like when you're losing weight, you can lose the first stone comparatively easily, but the second stone's a killer because of the way things are. Well, we've improved them. They were 80%, I'm making numbers up, they were 80% efficient 20 years ago. Now they're 98% efficient. That last 2%'s a killer.
I've always said we're on the cusp of a revolution in terms of engineering for cars and buses. The hybrid revolution hasn't kicked in yet. It takes 7 years from on the drawing board to in the showroom. 2010, every company will offer a hybrid.
Yes.
Electric cars are going to be more and more commonplace by the middle of the next decade. I read something, they're predicting that the average carbon dioxide emissions from a travelling car will be 40 grams per kilometre.
Let me come back to this, just this one thing that demonstrates the difficulty of predicting consequence. Electric cars, you're probably right in that we're going to have a lot more of them, they're going to be a lot more efficient. But there is a great problem with the electric car that we're not yet talking about, and we will. It's a bit like nuclear power. Nuclear power 20, 30 years ago, they were telling us, oh, it's absolutely fantastic, it's wonderful, it's marvellous. And then we suddenly realised that, hang on a minute, we've got this residue that we can't deal with. And it's going to be the same with the electric car, because the problem with electric cars isn't the making or converting the energy into electricity, it's the disposal of the battery afterwards. And frankly, the more efficient batteries get, the more polluting they are. We used to have the old wet battery, as it was called, donkeys years ago. Now we have the cadmium battery, and the cadmium battery is an absolute killer. So that, I mean, there are always consequences of technological improvements, aren't there?
Yeah.
And we don't always know what they are.
Well, that's it. You cannot quantify what that price will be. I agree with you, but is that a reason to stop building electric cars? I don't think so.
No, I'm not making that case. I'm just interested in the fact that any decision we make today will be with us for 20 or 30 years, and we don't know. We are, whatever direction we go in, whether we have a congestion charge or anything else, whatever direction we go in, we're walking in the direction of a good guess.
I think one thing that we can say for certain, though, is the pollution that currently is emitted in the city centre will be moved away from the city centre. So for people in Manchester who currently have to live next door to Piccadilly bus station or whatever, their lives are going to improve and their health's going to improve. And I think on a city basis, that can be a good thing.
All right, mate. Good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's Sean, who's part of an organisation, but there's nothing wrong with that. David in Prestwich, as we speak, Fairfield Street and Whitworth Street are being reduced to one lane under the guise of ease of crossing from station to bus stop. Yeah, right, says David in Prestwich, not completely convinced. Gary in Wigan. Hiya, Gary.
Hello, Alan. How are you?
Not bad, mate. What you got?
Good. Yeah, been to France. Very nice indeed.
Yeah, it is.
2 points. First one, very quickly. Gentleman before me just pointed out a few things about what's the answer. The answer is just ban the cars from the city centre within a certain mile radius and just catch the bus.
Okay.
Nobody's bothered about the cash. How much congestion charges there? Because I don't think that'll affect anyone who's got money. I'll just keep coming in. So it'll just be another stealth tax, basically. So I say ban the cars from going in the centre.
All right.
Point one.
Okay, go on.
Well, point two is a bit longer.
Well, I've got a bit of time.
I want to comment on point one. Do you agree with that or not?
Agree, disagree is neither here nor there. I agree with one point you made, and that is that if you merely make it expensive, the rich will continue to do it with impunity and the poor will not be able to.
That's right.
That's the nature of all taxation, but I spoke to a chap many years ago. He was a driver, a chauffeur no less. Yeah. And I asked him about the congestion charge that was supposed to come into London, and it wasn't there then, and he said, well, our boss won't care. It's a bit like the parking charges. He doesn't care, because I sit there in his Rolls-Royce outside the office door. If the traffic warden comes, I drive round the block.
That's right.
So it's no skin off his nose. He's paying me $35,000 a year. He's got a £250,000 car, £4.50 as it was promoted, £4.50 to come into London. He ain't going to care about. And he was bob on. So that point is hard to argue with. What was your second and longer one?
Right, the second and longer one. Just a snippet on the first point. We pay a road tax. Why should we pay anything else? Anyway, let's forget about that first one now. It's about your gentleman you had on about 15 minutes ago. He sounded a bit perturbed about joining the Labour Party, etc.
Oh, yes, yeah, that was Ray. Go on.
Yeah, he sounded... Well, he's got a point, really, because I think everyone should understand that. No matter what government you're going to get in, they're not listening. This country is crying out, saying, stop people coming into the country. There's not enough room. Now, it sounds a lot of crap, obviously, some of that. There's not enough room. There's enough room. But what the point I think they're trying to say is they don't want all these illegal immigrants coming in, taking all the rent.
Well, all right. There's a couple of thoughts on that. And the first one is that there is no legislation that lets illegal immigrants in by definition. I'm playing words with you, but an illegal immigrant comes outside the laws. So it doesn't matter how many laws you make, illegal immigrants will still exist. In fact, if you make it stricter, there'll be even more illegal immigrants. However, that's neither. The government recently has introduced, and I endured the experience just 2 days ago, but the government has introduced greater passport control, so much so that I was in a 3/4 of an hour queue to come into Liverpool Airport.
That's right, same as me yesterday.
Yeah, so they have improved it, but
they have improved it. The fact of the matter is, I don't know what the policies are for letting people in the country now. I don't want to get into that because it's too big an argument. All I know is the people that the majority of this country is talking about, and you're not listening to the people. The government don't listen. It's not, they just must think you don't have the brains. We're in power. We know what we're doing, and let us get on with it because you voted us in. So I think the people should really start thinking next time they vote. Because they just vote on a whim. Oh, my dad voted Labour, so I will. It's rubbish.
All right.
They should actually read the policies of what this government's going to do. Whoever's going to go in.
Well, we shall have to wait for the manifestos for that. But Gary, thank you very much indeed. I've no idea when the next general election will be. Looking at the poll last night, I suspect it'll be on the last possible day, unless, of course, the Labour Party get rid of Gordon Brown before then. Watch this space. They're coming. Labour Party are coming to Manchester in September. There's about 8 of them left, I think. See you on tomorrow and Monday. Ta-da!
In Manchester now, tonight at 5, find out how you'll get your say in a referendum on Greater Manchester's congestion charge.